In this video, we'll build a mobile-friendly, sticky social media bar with HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap. Okay guys, so let's check out the social media bar here before we get started with the tutorial. So as you'll see, when we scroll up the page, we're going to have this section of the window where it's going to stay sticky, and we're going to set a height for where it unsticks as well with the gray section. Then when we flex the window down, you'll see that it's going to quickly change into the mobile version underneath 1140 pixels in width. And then we're going to have the social media icons get smaller as we flex the window down to the mobile version of the social media bar. So before we take a look at the files we'll need to get started, my goal for this video is to get up to 60 likes. And if you end up liking the video, remember to subscribe and turn on your notifications for new tutorials. In the description of this video will be the starter files that I've prepared for the tutorial, where we'll find the index.html file, and I'm going to be using the free program Visual Studio Code to build the social media bar. Also in the starter files, you're going to see this file called 12 website bundle. So if you double click that and open it up in Google Chrome, you're going to find a link to my website using the image or the button. Then once we're on my website, if you go up to the resources link, you're going to see that I have a number of resources for building and customizing websites, including the Visual Studio Code text editor lesson, where you'll find links to the extensions that I use, as well as all of my settings, which you can import right into Visual Studio Code by following the lesson there. And there's also going to be a lesson to Bootstrap and an introduction to the Bootstrap grid system, which is the responsive CSS framework that we'll be using in this tutorial. And we'll cover Bootstrap in more detail as we're laying out the website and getting to know the grid system. Also, one last thing before we go over to Visual Studio Code is that this sticky social media menu is based on a design that's included as a bonus to the 12 website bundle pack, which you saw in the file as well as on the front page of my website. So let's put away the starter file window here and see what's already included for us in Visual Studio Code inside of index.html and style.css. So first off, in index.html here in the head section, I'm not going to cover everything in great detail. You can check out one of my complete website design tutorials to learn about all of the meta tags here. But what I will cover is we're going to be linking to the bootstrapmin.css file for the Bootstrap framework, as well as style.css. And we have a Google font included for us to give us the font style that we'll be using. Also included here are the jQuery and Bootstrap.js files. This is the latest version of jQuery to be compatible with Bootstrap.js, and we're not going to use anything from the Bootstrap framework that would require the JavaScript file, but just in case you're building a website around this social media bar, you can use those files to take advantage of the JavaScript features with the Bootstrap library. Then at the very bottom, we have a file included for us for Font Awesome, which is the plugin that we'll be using to display the icons that we see here for the various social media pages. So if we go back to my website real quick, on the resources page, I also have a lesson on website customizations or design tools. And from there, you'll see a link to the Font Awesome website. So here, if we just do a simple search for Facebook, for example, it's going to show us all of the free available Facebook icons that we have here that we can select from the library. And if we click on one, it's going to give us the HTML right here at the top of the page that we can simply copy and paste into index.html. Moving up the page and over to style.css, we also have a little bit of info included there. So the reset here at the top is for our font family from Google Fonts, as well as font size large to make the font go from 16 pixels to 18 pixels in Google Chrome. Also, we have some media queries started for us already here for the responsive CSS that we'll be adding later in the tutorial for the mobile version, as we see when the icons get smaller and narrower in size on the smaller width devices such as iPhones and iPads. And at the very bottom, we have a cheat sheet for the Bootstrap responsive breakpoints that we'll be looking to as we lay out the social media bar. So now let's get started with laying out our HTML content. So we're going to start off with the background colors that we're seeing before we actually lay out our social media bar. So with Bootstrap, they have background colors set up for us already. And the background color that we'll be using above and below the social media bar is going to be the BG-primary class. And then we'll use BG-secondary for the gray shade that's seen at the bottom of the page. So let's go back over to index.html, and I'm going to hit the Go Live button in the lower right hand corner to start the live server extension that's covered in the resources on my website. Then let's add some heading text here to make sure that we're connected by just writing hello. And if I save it, there we have our text appearing automatically in Google Chrome. So for the background color, let's add the bg-primary class. And then I'm going to add some height to it with style height 25 vertical height, which means 25% of the height of the window. And you can always add the height inside of style.css so we don't have any internal style, but we'll just do it internally so we can see the effect of the sticky bar. So I'm going to copy this BG primary class and add it underneath the next blue background comment in the HTML. And let's change the vertical height to 50 vertical height to give us the blue background shade that will appear underneath the bar. And then once we've added that, let's also add the BG secondary class for the gray. So we can copy this again and paste it in. Then I'll change BG-primary to BG-secondary. And so it takes up enough height to cover the whole page. Let's change it to 150 vertical height. This way we'll have enough height on the page to see that our sticky social bar will unstick once we get to the bottom of the blue section. Now what we'll do is we'll need to add a parent element around the sticky bar to specify the height that we want it to be sticky within. So this is going to start at the top of the sticky bar and at the bottom of this blue section, because the blue section is actually going to be inside of that parent element along with the sticky bar. So the parent element we can call whatever we want to call it as long as there's a parent element around the sticky bar. So let's simply give this an ID and call it social-media-sticky. And then I'll hit enter, and we're going to move the closing div to underneath the second BG primary with the blue background. And now we're ready to start our social bar. So the cool thing with Bootstrap is we can apply the sticky top class that we're going to use to any element to make it sticky. So if we just add some heading 1 text, and I'll just write test here, you'll see that there we have our test text showing. And what we can do is add a class to this called sticky-top, and Bootstrap will take care of the sticky positioning using the CSS framework. But you'll notice that using the sticky top class, it's not going to give us the background color unless we apply it to that element specifically. So with Bootstrap, we can just apply a background color to an element that has a 100% width, or we can use this cool class that they have called Jumbotron, and I'm just going to do a quick search for it here in the components. And this already has some background color and spacing applied to it, which we can use for our sticky bar, and we'll be customizing the Jumbotron class a little bit as well. So let's delete this heading 1 and add the Jumbotron class, followed by the sticky top class. Then we can hit enter, and inside of this, we're going to add a container to set a max width for our social media icons as well as the title. This way it doesn't span any wider than 1140 pixels. Then the column that's going to include our social media icons, we're going to want that centered. So what we can do is we can use a class in addition to the row with Bootstrap called justify-content-center, and that's going to center the column for us. Then we can also use a class called text-center to center the actual social media icons and the text. Now let's add our first column, which will contain the heading text that we see saying connect with us on social media. So with Bootstrap, Bootstrap has a class to make it so we don't have this display on screens until we get up to a certain width. So that class is going to be called d-none for display none. And then we'll also add a class for where we want it to start displaying. So in this case, we're going to start displaying this heading text on the extra large screen width. So it's going to be 1140 pixels with the container, but with container fluid with Bootstrap, that would be 1200 pixels. So we're going to say d-xl-block for display block at 1140 pixels. Then this column, when we get up to the extra large screen width at 1140 pixels, is going to take up half of the page. So it's going to be half of the available columns to us inside of the Bootstrap grid system. So if we scroll down this page here at the Bootstrap website, we'll see we have 12 columns to work with, and we can divide them however we want across the Bootstrap column breakpoints. So since we're using up half of the available 12 columns, we're going to use the class col-xl-6 for half of the columns at 1140 pixels. Then we're also going to add a little padding top above our heading, and we're going to use a class with Bootstrap called pt-1, which will give us padding top of 0.25 rem. Now let's add our heading text using a heading 3 tag, and I'm just going to copy this text right here. You can type it in or just add lorem, which will fill out dummy text for you in Visual Studio Code. So now if we save it and take a look at Chrome, we're going to see that we have our text displaying inside of our Jumbotron, and when we flex the window down, it's going to appear and disappear at the 1140 pixel mark. So now we're ready to start laying out the column for the actual social media icons. So we're going to use up 6 out of the 12 available columns at the full screen width, but we're going to go from smallest to largest since Bootstrap is mobile first, and the first breakpoint is going to be at the small screen width at 576 pixels. So anything under this, the social media icons will take up 100% of the width, but once we get up to 576 pixels, we're going to use up 10 out of the available 12 columns. So let's add the class col-sm-10. Then if we take another look at the social media bar, the next breakpoint is going to be at the 768 pixel medium screen width, where we're going to drop it down to 8 out of the 12 columns. So let's add the class col-md-8. Then the next breakpoint will be at the large screen width, or 992 pixels, where we're going to decrease the number of columns down to 7 out of 12 from 8 out of 12. So let's add col-lg-7. Then the last breakpoint will bring us up to the extra large screen width, which as we know will be 6 out of the 12 columns, similar to the heading column. So let's add col-xl-6. Then similar to the first column, we're going to mess with the padding a little bit here to make it so the social media icons are in line with the heading at the extra large screen width, but then once we decrease the size, they're going to be centered. So what we'll do is we're going to add a little bit of padding to the bottom with pb-1 or 0.25 rem. Then we're going to remove the padding on the top with pt-0 until we get up to the extra large screen width when they're next to the heading, and we're going to match up the padding top. So let's add pt-xl-1 for padding top 0.25 rem at the extra large screen width. So now inside of our column, we're ready to start laying out our social icons, which we're going to put inside of an unordered list. So let's add ul, and we're going to give this a class called social. Then inside of our unordered list, we're going to have a list item for each one of the social media icons. So before we add the first list item, I'm going to copy this Facebook icon class again from the Font Awesome website so I can paste it in. And we're going to start this list item off, of course, with li. And inside of that, we're going to have our link, which we'll use the anchor text or a tag for. Then for the link address, you can put whatever link you want to your social media page if you want. So for example, I'll just add my Facebook page here, which is facebook.com/w3newbie. Then to make sure that the Facebook link opens up in a new tab, we can add target_blank. Then I'll paste in the HTML from Font Awesome to display the Facebook icon. So now if we save it and take a look in Chrome, we'll have our first icon appearing, which we're going to style later and get rid of the list item bullet point next to it, as well as changing the size and the appearance. But first, let's lay out the rest of our icons that we see here. So what we can do is copy this first list item and paste it underneath. Then I'm going to get rid of the link that we see here. And with that, all we'll need to change now will be the actual Facebook icon class. So we can copy this list item itself and paste it in for the number of icons that we have displaying. So we'll want to paste it in 4 times after this one. And now all we'll need to do is change the Facebook icon class to fit the icons that we want. So let's say Twitter. Then the third one is Instagram. Then the fourth one is YouTube. Then we have Pinterest and LinkedIn. All right, so now if we save it, let's take a look in Chrome, and it looks good except for the Instagram icon. We're actually going to be using the one with the color filled in, so that's going to be Instagram-square. So now that we've got all of our icons set up, we're ready to add our CSS to get it matching to the original, since that was the last of our HTML that we'll be adding for the social media bar. So let's start by styling the Jumbotron that we added from Bootstrap, which is this gray section, as well as the white space that we're seeing underneath it. So we'll want to target the Jumbotron class that we see right here, and some of the CSS that we'll add we could use Bootstrap classes for, but since we're going to be adding specific CSS outside of the Bootstrap classes, we'll do it all in style.css. So let's add the Jumbotron class here, and then we're going to add a background color, but we'll use background because we're going to add a gradient to it instead of a solid color. So you might notice with the finished version, it's going to be a little bit darker on the left than it is on the right, and you can change the gradient to your own custom colors, but let's start by adding linear gradient. So I'll add linear dash gradient, and then we're going to go from left to right. So I'll add to right, then the colors will be F2, F2, F2 for the first one, which is a light gray, and then FB, FB, FB for the second, which is just slightly off-white in color. So now when we save it, you'll be able to see that it goes from gray to white by the white background underneath it. And if we were to change the FB to all sixes, which is gray in hex values, you'll see that it goes from the light gray to the dark gray. Next, with the Jumbotron class using Bootstrap, we'll notice that if we go back, there's a little bit of border radius off to the edge that's kind of hard to pick up, but we're going to do away with it by adding border-radius 0. And then let's also remove the margin from the bottom to get rid of the white space that the Jumbotron class adds as well. Then let's also remove the padding, or reduce it rather, on the top and bottom of the Jumbotron because of the amount of space that will be around our content. So let's go back and add padding. Then I'm going to add 1 rem on the top, which is 18 pixels, 0 left right, and 0.5 rem or 9 pixels on the bottom. So now that that's set, the last thing that we'll add to the Jumbotron is let's add a little bit of box shadow underneath it, which I think looks really great with sticky navigation menus and bars like we're making here. So let's add box shadow, 0 horizontal radius, 0.5 rem vertical, and a 0.5 rem blur radius. Then for red, green, blue, alpha, we'll add all zeros for black. Then let's make it 80% transparent, and we'll add 0.2 to show 20% of the black shade. All right, so now that we have the box shadow set and the sticky portion looks pretty good with the gray section scrolling it up the page, let's go about styling the social icons on the right-hand side. So what we'll do is we'll want to target the unordered list that we added in our HTML, and that unordered list we gave this class called social. So we'll want to reference ul.social to target the unordered list and the class. And then we're going to do away with the bullet points off to the left with list style type none. And to get them displaying next to one another, we're going to use display flex. And then these are going to separate themselves apart from one another. Once we add a little bit more CSS, they're going to populate basically the column width that we give it. So in order to separate the icons, we'll need to target the list item itself, and then they'll take up the width of the column using the display flex CSS declaration. So let's target the ul.social class and then the list item inside of it. Then we'll use margin 0 auto to center our list items containing the icons. So now if we take a look, they're going to be separated, and we're not able to tell by looking at it here, but these are also taking on some margin on the bottom. So let's add margin 0 auto, or we could just add margin 0 all around to them here, and that's going to do away with the margin underneath our icons. And let's also add padding 0 to get rid of some additional horizontal padding around the icons. So now they're going to be spaced out pretty good in the column that we have set for them. And now we're ready to style the actual icons. So the class that we'll want to target to style the Font Awesome icons, I'm going to get by inspecting the icon itself. And this is going to be a class from Font Awesome called svg-inline-fa. And in case you want to use Font Awesome icons elsewhere on your website with this styling, let's reference the Jumbotron class first before we add the Font Awesome class. Then let's change the font size for them to 2rem, which is 36 pixels, given the font size large style declaration. So once we save it, we'll be matched up with the original in size here. Then one other step that you could take is you could add some margin around them. So for example, if we add margin 0 top bottom, and then for the left right, we add 1rem or a value above 1rem, that's up to you. You'll see that they're going to be separated a little bit more. So you can change that if you want. I'm just going to leave this at margin 0, 1rem though, which wouldn't change it from the original. Next, for the colors of our icons, let's add the hover color, which is going to be gray. And then we'll add the colors to each specific icon in index.html. So let's add the hover pseudo class to the end of this. And then what we can do is simply change the color to gray, and we'll just write out gray instead of using a hex value. Then if we take a look and we hover over them, we'll have the gray shade. Before we move back over to index.html to add the inline CSS for each one's individual color, let's change the size of the icons when we flex the window down to match the original with the media queries that we have started for us at the bottom of index.html. So the first one is going to be under 768 pixels, or the medium screen breakpoint, and then we'll have one underneath the 576 pixel mark. So what we can do is we can simply copy the CSS that we have added for us already for the Jumbotron font size and the margin. Then let's reduce the font size to 1.6rem and reduce the margin left right to 0.8rem instead of 1rem. Now if we save it, we'll see that it's going to be matching up to the original until we get down to the 576 pixel mark. So let's copy the CSS and paste it in underneath the small screen width media query that we have started for us already. And I'm going to reduce the font size to 1.4rem and the margin left right to 0.5rem. So now once we save it, everything will be matching up to the original except for the colors of the social media icons. So what I did before making this video is I went and I looked up all the actual hex values for the social media websites that we have icons for here. So I'm going to add style, color, and then a hashtag. And so we can apply this to all of the list items here. I'm going to copy this with the style color, and then I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to select all instances using Command-Shift-L of this HTML right here. Then we can paste in the style color. Now all we'll have to add is the actual hex value. So starting with the dark blue Facebook hex value, that's 3B5998. Then next for Twitter, that's going to be the light hex value for the blue shade, 00ACED. Next for Instagram, the hex value for that is 3F729B. And then the red shade for YouTube is the hex value C4302B. Then we have the red Pinterest with C8232C. And finally, LinkedIn's blue shade is 0E76A8. So now when I save it, we'll have all of our colors set, but we're going to lose the gray shade for the hover pseudo class when we hover over the icons. So what we'll need to do is go back to style.css and just add important after color gray here with the hover pseudo class. So I'll just write !important to override the colors when we hover over them. Okay, so there we have the gray shade, and that concludes the entire tutorial for laying out the sticky social media bar. I want to thank you for watching. Please remember to like the video if you haven't done so already, subscribe, and turn on your notifications for new tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.